Hello, welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. Mike, it is week 2 of free agency. It's also a beautiful day out. I don't know what it's like near you, but it is like 70 degrees outside, so I'm a little, I don't want to
It's
say
like
annoyed.
high 60s for me. So
It is gorgeous outside. I'm not annoyed that we're doing the show, but I think after this, maybe I'll go for a little walk outside, a little run. But until then, let's talk some Jets. How you doing, buddy?
well, you got to be on the clock first, of course. So you got to get that out
Yes.
of the way.
I guess.
So Jets have done some moves. They have made some of the moves of all time in their last couple days.
Yep.
Not a lot of long-term money, a lot of 1 year, a lot of prove-it deals, and that may not be the worst thing because we saw what happened the last couple of years where they were going for it with the big names and all that, and it didn't work. So it seems like Darren Muge and Aaron Glenn kind of taking a step back this year. They're kind of taking their foot off the gas, to use the Robert Saleh terminology of gas and cars and all that and brakes.
Sure.
And they're looking ahead towards the future a little bit. So we'll get into some of these new signings, which ones probably are going to matter, which ones won't matter. We'll also look at some NFL draft stuff because right now the draft it's going to be a mystery for the Jets. It can go in a lot of different directions. For all that, thank you guys for tuning in. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. And on YouTube, you could subscribe. That's free. You can support the show. You don't have to pay a dime, free. Or for 99 cents a month, you could join our membership program, and you'll get priority reply in the comments. So we got a lot to talk about right now. So they've made 7, 8, I think 10 almost new free agent signings since we stopped talking about Justin Fields and Brandon Stevens and Andre Sisco, which was kind of the meat of their free agency.
And Rashad Weaver. We talked
and Rashad Weaver, of course. They've signed 3 new defensive tackles, which was an area of weakness. Derek Nottie, Byron Cowart, and Jay Tufele. Tufele I want to talk the least about. He's probably just going to be like an end of the roster fighting for a thing. He may not end up even being kind of he probably is not going to play a huge role. If he's on the field a lot, it's like Lecky Fotu. If he's on the field a lot, that's probably a problem. So Tufele, he's whatever, practice squad, end of the roster kind of guy.
Yeah.
Byron Cowart, we'll get into a little bit more, kind of up and down, former number 1 recruit in all of college, kind of carved out a role for himself. He might be a role player, maybe like a 4th defensive tackle on the roster. Him and Leonard Taylor will be fighting. Nottie, of all the moves they've made lately, is probably the most consequential because he could probably end up being a starter at some point. Nottie has a very weird road because he's won 3 Super Bowls with Kansas City, started for the last probably 6 years. He was a pretty reliable starter for Kansas City. Then last year, loses his starting job to Tershawn Wharton, who just got paid in Carolina. And the last 2 years, really, he's been on a very sharp decline. Doesn't offer a ton in terms of pass rush. He's basically just a one-gap run stuffer. In the last couple of years, he was not amazing at stuffing the run. The thing about Nottie that confused me was I always try to look for the opposing fan test, where if the fans of the team are upset that guy's leaving, then I'm like, okay, this could be a pretty good signing. And a lot of Chiefs fans were upset that Tarek Nottie is leaving. And then my opinion got changed. I was talking to our buddy Matt Connor over at Arrowhead Addict. If you ever want to check out any Kansas City Chiefs stuff, that's a good place to do it, over at Arrowhead Addict. And I was just trying to get the scope on Nottie. And he had a really good quote where, first off, he said so bad with a lot of O's, which is not encouraging. Then, if he wasn't trying to save every lonely dog in Kansas City, he would have been despised by the fans, which is not a bad review. That's a bad review.
Damn.
Nottie is, I think, in the right scheme, though, because also part of it, too, is I think he just looked worse compared to Chris Jones and Tershawn Wharton, who just got a huge contract. So that might have been part of it, too, where he just wasn't as good as those two, and they only played 2 defensive tackles most of the time, so he had to go sit on the bench. You use this term to describe the offensive line last year where you said if John Simpson's your worst offensive lineman, that's still pretty good. Now, he ended up being pretty good. If you look at this defense as a whole, if Derek Nottie is your worst defensive starter, I still think that's a pretty good defense. If all he can do is kind of get back on track and plug up the gaps in the run game, that's really all the Jets need him to do. They just don't need Quinnen Williams to do everything. And they can't have a nothing like Javon Kinlaw. At least the Jets think he's nothing. The Commanders seem to think he's not nothing. I don't know how. As long as they get an upgrade there and a guy who can stop the run, because that was their big problem early in the year is they couldn't stop the run. then I like this signing a lot.
Yeah, I not as someone that I have been, I don't want to say pushing for the Jets to sign for a few years, but somebody who's been on my radar because the Jets they've realistically needed like a one tech run stuffing nose tackle type for a long time now. Really, since Foley Fatukasi left, they have not really been able to fill that role. They've tried it with Al Woods. They tried it last year with Lecky Fotu, who played 2 games. They have not been able to get someone to fill that role. Nadi is the closest thing they've had to Fatukasi since then. But like you said, Mike, the declining production in recent years is concerning, and it probably is evidence of why they diminished his role this past season in Kansas City. For the record, PFF grades aren't everything, but PFF absolutely hates Derek Nadi, including his run defense. They think he's one of the worst run defenders in the league, which, he's a run stuffing nose tackle. So that's not exactly a great.
That's his entire job.
Right. And it goes beyond that too. Last season in 247 snaps, 167 of which were run defense snaps, he had 5 run stops, which was one of the lowest rates out of any qualified defensive tackle in the NFL. He missed over 11% of his tackles, and how many pressures? He had 3 total pressures. Huh. So didn't do anything as a run stuffer. Didn't really do anything with any of his snaps, and graded out extremely poorly. He had a 40.8 PFF grade, a 45.7 run defense grade, which, Mike, if you'll believe it or not, was his best run defense grade since 2021 when he posted a 50.8 run defense grade. So the numbers aren't pretty. But what the Jets probably see with Derek Nadi, one, outside of him seemingly being a wonderful human being, and I'm sure that's why he was beloved in Kansas City. He did a lot of off-field charity work, so that's, it's basically a Solomon Thomas replacement in that regard. But the Jets see a guy with a ton of starting experience. He's played like 100 career games or something like that. Started like, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but probably like 80 of those games. He's played a lot. Very, very experienced player. And they're adding that to a defensive line room that outside of Quinnen Williams really has nothing. I mean, I know they just brought in Byron Cowart. They have Jay Tufele. Both of those guys are fringe roster players. Cowart maybe has a little bit more pedigree than Tufele. At least he was part of a rotation last year, and we'll get to him in a moment. He wasn't a part of a very good rotation. He was part of the Chicago Bears defensive line and was arguably the weakest link there too. But what the Jets are doing here is they're bringing in bodies. And at least with Derek Nadi, you're bringing in an experienced body who, in theory, fills
the rhyme on purpose.
What did I say?
Did you rhyme on purpose?
Oh, did I rhyme? No, I didn't. Look at that.
Naughty and body.
Naughty and body. No, I didn't. Call me. I was gonna make a Meg Thee Stallion reference.
B-Rabbit over here.
No, they're bringing in experienced bodies. One of which is Derek Nadi. That was on purpose. And yeah, I get what they're looking for there. None of these guys, whether it's Nadi, Cowart, Tufele, they're likely not going to be a part of a long-term solution at the position. I don't think we're going to be looking at 2027 and looking at any of these guys still on the roster, but they fill spots on the roster right now. And I imagine the Jets will still address the position in the draft because it is a very good defensive tackle draft. None of these guys move the needle for me, but at least Nadi has more of a pedigree and fits more of a role that the Jets need him to.
I want to get to Cowart first. Then I want to go talk about the draft specifically with this because I think Nadi can influence it a little bit. Cowart's just a fascinating football story. He used to be the number 1 recruit in the entire country.
Yeah.
You look at some of the guys that he's over, all pros and things like that. He was number 1. And he goes to Auburn and barely even plays. He was like a defensive end, and he just never got in the field, didn't really play that much. He had to transfer and go to Maryland. Still really didn't even play that much. Then he goes to New England. He moves kind of inside. New England actually takes him. They make him a full-time defensive tackle. And while not amazing, he's been able to carve out kind of a solid career as like a role player. As we'll mention before, he did go to the Bears last year. Not a particularly good defensive line, but he did start 7 games, played fairly regularly, 2.5 sacks. A guy who, again, PFF's not going to love him, but right now, the 3 guys that I think are guaranteed to be on the opening day roster for the Jets at defensive tackle are Quinnen, obviously, Derek Nadi, and I think Leonard Taylor. I think Leonard Taylor showed up last year where I think right now he's the number 3 defensive tackle on this team. I think right now, if you don't address the position, Cowart and Leonard are probably competing for that number 3 spot, and then whoever loses gets the number 4. Why is that important? Because I think they still may address defensive tackle, especially maybe not the 2nd, 3rd round, because this is a meat and potatoes trenches draft. The best parts of this draft are the offensive line and the defensive line. That's where you want to get guys. This draft is very deep at defensive tackle. Maybe they get a guy second, third round. Now they don't have to get a Mason Graham early on. Now they don't have to move around and try to find like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant. They don't have to do that anymore because they have enough bodies where they can just throw enough bodies at the problem and maybe they'll find somebody who sticks, kind of thing. So I think that these moves in general, specifically Noddy and kind of Cowart, it changed their draft strategy in that I think their first couple picks are going to be all offensive. It's going to be wide receiver, tight end, maybe a right tackle. That's where I think they're going to go because of this. And then because they have Noddy and Cowart lying around next to Taylor, the third round might be where they end up targeting defensive tackle.
Yeah, I honestly, I think all options are still on the table when it comes to 7. Like if Mason Graham is there at 7, I don't think that they would hesitate because they have Byron Cowart or J2 Fele on their roster.
I don't think they're obligated to now. Now, I felt like early on, if they didn't sign Noddy, they would have had to. Now they have options.
It is always best to give yourself as much flexibility going into the draft, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more with the offensive line situation, because I don't know if I feel that way about what they did at right tackle so far in free agency. But yeah, they have that flexibility because they at least have guys who are rosterable. I mean, Byron Cowart, he's a very interesting story. Like you said, obviously former number 1 overall recruit, went to New England, didn't really do much early in his career there. Then he ended up starting 14 games in 2020 and was, he's okay. That was probably his best year in the NFL. Injuries knocked him out for 2021. Then he was released, went to the Colts, was a backup for them, and then he was out of football in 2023. He was bouncing around practice squads, did not play in a game in 2023. Then he landed with the Bears last year, kind of found a semi-regular role there, ended up with 2.5 sacks, which is a career high. He'd only had 1 sack in his career before last season, so it's not like he was lighting it up before that. But yeah, he was, I believe, an 8%.
He was an edge rusher for most of his football career too, and the pass rush is his weak point.
Yes, yeah, he had an 8% run stop rate last year, 7.7% pressure rate. Both of those are fine. They're honestly around league average. Pressure rate maybe a tad below league average, but it's around league average. So, if the Jets get a guy who can fill that 4th defensive tackle role in Byron Cowart, that's fine. I think that's a fine role. But yeah, as far as the draft goes, I don't think any of these moves preclude them from making any moves, but it does give you a little bit extra depth and a little bit more, I guess, security. You have actual NFL caliber bodies in the defensive line room. Even if they're not particularly great and they're not particularly game-changing type talents, you don't feel obligated to take a Mason Graham or, move up in the second round if a Walter Nolan is there or something like that. They have more flexibility, which is good. Again, I don't think any of these guys are game changers. I don't think they're going to make or break the Jets season. And I don't think, the Jets are going to win or lose any more games because they signed these guys. But they're there. They are warm bodies. And sure, man, these are the signings that we're expecting from the Jets this offseason.
Byron Cowart, I thought he was number 1 in ESPN's rankings. He was number 3 in 247. Number 5, Derwin James. So he was above number 8, Josh Sweat. Number 12, Calvin Ridley. These are the guys he was ranked above.
Who was ahead of him?
These are some throwback college football names. Trenton Thompson, the old defensive tackle for Georgia.
Boy. Oh, yeah. Didn't he have off-field issues?
Nah, he didn't play his first 2 years. Then he had 1 okay year declared when he shouldn't have, and then practice squad guy. And, this is a throw. Martez Ivey, the old offensive lineman from Florida.
I was going to say Florida. That was going to be my guess. Florida offensive tackle, right?
Yep, those were the 2 ahead of him. Josh Rosen, number 11. Kyler Murray, number 34. Christian Wilkins, 24. Wow. Christian Kirk, 25. Minka Fitzpatrick, 30. This is the kind of athlete this guy was thought to be among once upon a time.
The thing is, he's going to be 29 before the season starts. So I think we've reached a point where,
he ain't getting much better.
Yeah, the upside isn't really there anymore. I'm not really looking at his athletic traits and saying, hey, look, he can get a lot better. He's kind of what he is at this stage.
That's just a fun trip down memory lane.
That it is.
The Jets also signed 2 pass catchers. Yep. Again, they're in this kind of weird area where I think they're above just warm bodies, but they're below starters. That seems to be the thing with a lot of the Jets signings. They're not just camp guys fighting for a spot, but they're not high-end starters. And they got 2 guys like that for pass catchers. Tyler Johnson, the wide receiver, and Stone Smart, the tight end. Now, you think a guy with a name like Stone Smart would be a really good tight end. That's just such a good name.
It is.
Stone Cold Smart.
Yeah, Stone Cold Smart.
Yeah, Stone. He was gonna go by Chuck Superstar, but that was unavailable, so he went with Stone Smart.
What is that? Is that a reference? Am I missing that reference?
I'm just thinking of badass names.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was a reference to like a 1940s.
So Stone Smart, a former college quarterback, actually goes to wide receiver in college. Small school guy. Nobody even gave this guy a thought. He goes to the Chargers, and part of it was because the Chargers were very desperate for playmakers and pass catchers, but a lot of fans wanted to see more from Stone Smart. And you got to see this kind of weird hybrid tight end receiver. They used to call him an H-back back in the day, like that kind of stuff, where he can't block worth a damn. He's just never going to be that. But good hands, good route running, made some nice plays down the field. He had one like 50-yard touchdown where he made a couple plays after the catch. I believe it was against Green Bay. A guy who I think probably has a little more left in the tank developmentally. And I would not want this guy starting. If he's starting, that is probably not good. But I could see a role where he ends up, or a future where he ends up with a nice role in this offense solely based on his receiving potential as a tight end. Because Jeremy Ruckert doesn't have really none of the other tight ends on the roster I feel very confident in. So this is a smart dice roll, especially, again, because we're going to bring back the old fan test thing. A lot of Chargers fans were not happy that he played as little as he did, and they were upset to see him go. Tyler Johnson, for those of you that were into the Shrine Bowl back then, he was once regarded as like a fringe first-round pick, and then he went to the Shrine Bowl. He didn't do anything, and his stock kind of fell. Didn't run the best at the Combine, I remember. This guy has a very weird trajectory. He was at Minnesota, if you remember him. Goes to Tampa in like the 5th round, becomes a semi-decent wide receiver 4 in those Tom Brady years. I think one year he had almost 500 yards receiving. 3 to 60. Which for a wide receiver 4, you take that. Barely plays for 2 more years after that. Then he goes to the Rams and has kind of like a mini, I don't want to say resurgence because he only had 291 yards and a touchdown, but enough to prove he can still play in the league. And for a Jets team that obviously they're going to add more wide receivers. They're going to draft one at some point. I think they're probably going to keep Lazard. Who knows where Corley is at this point? This thing's unsettled. And right now, they're not going to spend a ton of money on high-end guys. They need some of these one-year lottery ticket deals to kind of strike gold. That's what they need. And Johnson, because I don't think he's going to have the same sort of production that he had in a Matt Stafford offense, but who knows? This is, I think, a good risk to take. Younger guy, off a solid season, off an offense that I think will probably look a little bit similar to what Tanner Engstrom's going to do. These signings are, you could dislike the direction, even though we necessarily don't, but these signings I feel like are pretty solid moves from Darren Muji.
These 2 signings move me a lot more than any of the D-tackle moves that they made, because I think not only do they fill the role of, hey, these are warm bodies who are NFL caliber players who we can plug in on a roster, but I do think, especially in the case of Stone Smart, there is some developmental upside there. And they're bringing in 2 guys who I think are young enough to continue getting better. And in the case of Smart, I'll start with Stone Smart, which, again, fantastic name, Stone Cole Smart. He is a very, very late bloomer. You mentioned he was a college quarterback. He moved to wide receiver his final year at Old Dominion, where, by the way, he did, I believe, cross paths with Zach Kuntz. So he was a teammate of Zach Kuntz in college.
That's a pretty good tight end room for college, I got to say.
Well, Smart was a wide receiver.
That's a pretty good pass catching room, I should say.
It is. 2 awesome athletes as well.
And didn't do anything with it. Jeez.
Good. Well, I mean, look, Kuntz.
That's Old Dominion, but if you got 2 NFL receivers.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Kuntz is Kuntz an NFL caliber player? Let's be real.
Well, he got hurt. So.
Let's not yet. But regardless, he's only been playing the tight end position for 3 years. You know, he's never going to offer much as a blocker. He's only about like 225. He doesn't get used in line a ton. But for somebody who has only been playing the position for a few years, he's definitely still has some upside as a receiver. Last year,
and he didn't come from a very creative passing game at all. He came from Greg Roman.
No, he did not. Yeah, he caught 16 of 19 catches, or 19 targets last year. So he was targeted 19 times, caught 16 of those passes, 3 of 4 in contested catch opportunities. This is someone who maximized his snaps when he was out there, was barely used at all in the early part of the year, was even inactive, a healthy scratch a couple of times. But once you got into that latter part of the season, from week 13 or week 11 to week 14, he had, I think, 13 catches for around like 164 yards over a 4-week stretch. That's pretty good. That was when he was actually starting to get used in that Chargers offense. Again, he's not going to be much of an inline blocker. He's not somebody that you want playing 60% of snaps because of that, but he can definitely carve out a role in this team, especially given how weak the pass catch group currently is on this team. The wide receiver room is very thin. The tight end room is very thin. I think Stone Smart could actually carve out a role. And the same goes for Tyler Johnson, who's another person who has definitely maximized his snaps, especially last season with the Rams. Caught 5 of 8 contested catch opportunities. He is actually 13 of 19 in contested catch opportunities in his NFL career, which is an extremely high rate. Again, not a huge sample size, but his hands are excellent. I think he is somebody who, again, there is still room to grow. There is still room for him to be I don't know if he's ever going to be a number 1 or a number 2 receiver, but maybe develop into a quality number 3. I think that's possible. And given how thin this wide receiver room is right now, I mean, I expect at this stage that the Jets will bring back Allen Lazard, and I mentioned that as a possibility a little over a week ago, and fans were not happy about it. It seems like that's the direction they're headed at this point, and I can't blame them because looking at this wide receiver market, somehow that Lazard contract is actually pretty good value, even though he's not a very good player. It's actually
in this market, he's an $11 million receiver.
He absolutely is. And I think you could argue he'd go for even more if he was released. I mean, I don't, maybe he wouldn't, but they're not going to get anybody probably better than him that they're realistically going to bring in. So they'll probably have Allen Lazard. And then that wide receiver 3 job is going to be Tyler Johnson, Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson, somebody in the draft. Like they will probably still add to that room, but I think Tyler Johnson will be in the mix. I think Stone Smart will be in the mix. I would not be surprised if either of these guys carve out legitimate roles next year. And then who knows? They're both only 26 years old. Maybe there is a future for them beyond 2025.
Right now, if you had a gun to your head, how do you think the wide receiver depth chart looks with Tyler Johnson?
I think they add someone in the draft.
Let's say also hypothetically they use a top 50 pick on a receiver.
Oh, so I would say second round because I don't expect they'll do so in the first round. I think second round.
You don't think they'll get Tet?
I don't think they would draft Tet. I honestly, I like the fit of Tet with the Jets. I actually think the Jets are a really good fit for him. I don't love him as a prospect. I don't think he's ever going to be – I don't see him as a wide receiver 1 caliber prospect. It's really reasonable to suggest that he could be a top 10 pick in this draft because, again, I think the latter half of that top 10 is going to be some guys who normally wouldn't be top 10 picks. But I do like he complements Garrett Wilson very, very well, and I do like that. So I wouldn't hate it at 7, but I would be surprised if they went in that direction. I could see it on day 2, and if that's the case, you're looking at Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, and then I have no idea. Whoever they draft, maybe that guy's good enough to be wide receiver 3 early on. I'd give the slight edge to Tyler Johnson right now. Probably say that day 2 pick would be wide receiver 4. And then wide receiver 5, you're battling between Gibson and Corley and Camp and see who can win.
I still think there's some sort of chance where they just look at, like the new staff looks at Corley, like, all right, there's no way he's this bad. Because I'm sure that a lot of teams probably had similar evaluations of maybe he gets another chance.
I think he will have a chance to earn a job. He's the wide receiver room is going to be wide open this summer. I'm not projecting that he's going to do anything.
If he can't win it in this room, he can't win it with anybody.
He couldn't beat out Irv Charles for snaps last year. Like, how's he like he couldn't beat out Irv Charles? He couldn't beat out Xavier Gibson. I don't
remember they had him ranked higher than Brian Thomas.
And Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey and all these guys who were good last year. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like that staff loved him. They freaking loved him. And then the fact that they were so outwardly high.
You would think if they loved him that much, they'd at least see art. Maybe if they they put him in the game once and he fumbles and then
that's what tells me, like, if the staff was that pumped about getting him and he still couldn't get on the field over terrible wide receivers.
When everything was breaking down and they were trying everything else.
That's a hard sell for me. So, yeah, I think the new regime's going to give him a chance. It's not going to cut him right now, but I don't have any faith that he's going to carve out a role next year. I hope he does. I hope I'm wrong. I would love if Malachi Corley turned around his career and actually became a viable piece for the Jets. They used the first pick in the 3rd round on him. They traded up for him. But I can't have any confidence in that right now.
God, that's bad. Brian Sternbeck waiting for the surprise retirement in August of the wide receiver everyone assumed in the offseason would be cut. That's a Corey Davis throwback.
That would be Allen Lazard this year.
Did he ever get any interest after
what if Lazard retires because he's like he can't stomach not playing with Aaron Rodgers? What if he retires? He's like, trade me to the Steelers, assuming Rodgers goes there, or I retire.
I mean, everywhere Wayne Gretzky went, he brought Marty McSorley. I don't know. It's possible. Sometimes you need that.
Sure. That would be crazy, though.
Now, Marty McSorley did that because everybody would try to beat up Gretzky. So then if they did, then Marty McSorley would beat the hell out of him. But Alan Lazard can't do that, but
his personal bodyguard.
That's pretty much what he was, yeah.
Lazard is a vibes guy for Rodgers. That's what he is.
And then they have signed 2 new offensive linemen.
They have.
Chukwuma Okorafor.
Yep.
And Josh Myers. Okorafor, I'm going to talk about first, because if I were to say right now they're probably going to add somebody later. But if they had to play a game, today is March 19th. If they had to play a game on March 20th, I'd probably say Okorafor is your starting right tackle.
Which is awful. Like, it's just crazy. That's crazy.
Well, here's the thing about Okorafor. Early in his Steelers career, I thought he was actually pretty okay. Then he kind of tails off near the end. Now, part of it too is they drafted Broderick Jones anyway, so they drafted his replacement anyway, so they move him into the starting lineup, and hasn't really gone amazing because Broderick Jones hasn't been that good either. Then he has this really weird time with the Patriots. First off, he signs to be their left tackle, so he moves from right to left tackle. He plays 12 snaps in week 1. Was bad. I think he gave up like 3 pressures.
Yeah, 6.
And then he just basically quit the team. He just left and never came back and quit. And now I guess he is back and wants to play with the Jets. Obviously, if we want to go the whole, John Simpson's your worst, like, it's not that level again, because I think Okorafor coming into this year is much less valuable than John Simpson was last year. But also, I think while unlikely, I think there's a world where he becomes a serviceable starting right. Serviceable, not good, not what, like, you could work around that. And for a Jets team that has so many holes at tight end and wide receiver and defensive tackle, I think there's a world where they target those positions in the draft. They leave Okorafor at right tackle. They try to survive till the end of this year, and then they figure out what's going on next year with like AVT, and then maybe that's where they make a more earnest, expensive push at a new right tackle. I don't hate, because again, people go, oh, the New England thing. I'm like, honestly, maybe he had a bad game. It was 12 snaps. Everybody has a bad 12 snap sequence. Garrett Wilson's had a bad 12 snap sequence here or there. Who knows? I don't even, and if you quit an entire year, maybe something was going on outside of football. I don't want to assume, but maybe that could happen. I don't know. But I think there's a world where he's the starting right tackle, and it's not ideal. He'd certainly be the worst starting offensive lineman. But if that's the plan of just get a stopgap, we'll figure it out next year. That'll be our weakness on offense, and we'll address like other stuff in the draft. I feel like he might have been the best of those 1-year stopgap options, which is not a huge compliment, but it's the truth.
I disagree. I mean, look, I don't think it's the absolute end of the world if he's your week 1 starting right tackle, but I think it's a really bad thing, and I think there are other moves they could have made that were a lot better. I mean, Kendall Lamb is still a free agent right now. That's somebody I've mentioned a lot. Kendall Lamb has been a very good, very serviceable, more than serviceable swing tackle throughout his career. Started, I think, 7 or 8 games for the Dolphins last year. Had like a 75 or 80 PFF pass block grade. He's graded out well. I don't think he allowed a single sack last year. Chukwuma Okorafor, at his peak, if we're talking prime Chukwuma Okorafor, which is a crazy
The glory days.
The glory days of Chukwuma Okorafor was a fine right tackle. He got an extension. He was a mid-round pick of the Steelers who got extended. I think it was a 3-year deal. He was fine. He started like 4 or 5 years in him at right tackle. He was like, you know what he was? He was their Brandon Shell. He was fine.
Yeah, if the Jets had a Brandon Shell level right tackle on their offensive line right now, I think we're fine with that.
Sure, but Brandon Shell, after he left the Jets, started, I believe, 2 years with the Seahawks and then went to the Dolphins and was, not even a playable player. And I think we're reaching that point with Okorafor now where, the last 2 years that he's played football, he's been benched. He was benched in 2023. Again, there was context. They drafted Broderick Jones. They wanted to get him on the field. I get it. Broderick Jones was not good. He was arguably even worse than Okorafor was. Okorafor wasn't very good in those games, but they still, he was, I guess, serviceable. Then he signs with the Patriots, 1 year, $4 million deal. He's expected to compete for the left tackle job. He actually doesn't win the left tackle job, which, again, this should be pointed out. He had never played left tackle in his NFL career before, to my knowledge. I believe he was strictly a right tackle in Pittsburgh.
Yes, you're correct.
Very interesting decision on New England's part to bring him in and say, hey, now you're switching to left tackle and you're competing for the starting job when you were just benched as a right tackle last year. That probably speaks more to the Patriots' disarray than Okorafor, but was beat out by Vadarian Lowe, who was a 6th round pick. I think he was in his 2nd year at that time, and he's also not very good. Lowe got hurt in training camp, so Okorafor actually had to start week 1, even though he lost the starting job. Like you said, played 12 snaps, 6 of which were pass block snaps. He had a lot of pressure on 3 of those and was benched before the half, and then quit and then left and just did not play another game in the NFL last year. So just looking at his last 2 years, like I know he was a solid starting right tackle for a few years before that. Looking at the last 2 years, that's a really hard sell for me. And I refuse to
I
believe.
could take one of those 2 years happening, but not
Right.
either. Not
If
both.
it was just after the Pittsburgh year and it's like, all right, he got benched. They had Broderick Jones. He was still okay enough. That's
Even
fine.
after the New England year, he had one bad game. You know, who doesn't have a bad
It's
game?
the last 2 years that we've seen him now, it's like, okay, these things have happened. Like that is hard for me to sell myself, let alone on this guy being the top backup tackle, but being your starting right tackle going into the year. That's a really hard sell for me. Especially when I do think there were better options out there. And I know people will throw out Jedrick Wills. I'm not as high on Wills. Like that's another guy. Even when first of all, he's played like 10 games or 11 games over the last 2 years. He's always hurt. And even when he's been out there, has not been very good. I know there's the allure of upside with him, but I would not say that Jedrick Wills is by any means the best tackle option like currently on the market and still out there. I just, if that's their plan at right tackle, if their plan is, hey, we don't have to draft an Armand Membu. We don't have to draft a starting caliber player because we have Chukwuma Okorafor. I think that's a mistake. I think that's a bad way to look at this roster. I think you could do that at D tackle with Derek Nottie, with Byron Cowart. I think it's serviceable to have those guys play next to Quinnen Williams. I mean, it's not going to be worse than it was last year. I don't think the trio of Derek Nottie, Brian Cowart, Jay Tufeli, whoever they bring in, will be significantly or any worse than Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, whoever, Bruce Hector, whoever they were throwing out there. Like I think they'll be.
He's about to get $60 million next offseason if the
I think he's right. Honestly, but I do think it's a big mistake if Chukwuma Okorafor is your right tackle. Now I'm not going to freak out. It's March 19th at the time we're recording this. I don't know what other moves they have in store. I mean, I've been banging the Armand Membu train, and it seems like that train has fully left the station, and it is. He, I think, is the top pick now for the Jets in most mock drafts at number 7.
I've seen more Warren, and that's my guy right now.
Warren is another guy too, for sure. I've seen Membu going as high as 4 to the Patriots, which would surprise me because they did just sign Morgan Moses to a 3-year deal. So it would be interesting if they drafted
Campbell. I could see because left side, but
I don't know if they see him as a tackle. But yeah, I don't love the Okorafor signing. I am to talk about Josh Myers, so get a little positivity.
Yeah, that one I thought was interesting.
I do really like the Josh Myers signing. That is essentially your Wes Schweitzer replacement. He literally, I believe, is taking his number. I believe he will be wearing number 71. Fun fact, that was my football number in high school as well.
71? You're not big enough for. I met you. I wasn't a 71.
I didn't play. I didn't get choice for top numbers. You think I had a pick of like number 25 or 7? You think I'm wearing that? Get out of here.
I will say my brother, my younger brother, when he played football, his first year playing football, like Pop Warner or whatever, they put him at quarterback and he had number 92.
Nice. I love that.
Quarterback 92.
Confuse the defense. But yeah, I really like the Myers signing. He is a more durable and honestly, I would argue better player than Wes Schweitzer. He missed part of his rookie year due to injury, but this is a guy who started, I believe he started all 56 games in the NFL. He was a second-round pick out of Ohio State. I remember
Justin Fields College Center.
Correct. He was Justin Fields College Center, so you're reuniting him with Fields, with Wilson, with Jeremy Ruckert as well. He was drafted. I remember when he was drafted in the second round. That year, I was like, hey, the Jets could target this guy. Like that was somebody I was looking at. I think a lot of Jets fans were looking at him as a potential target. Starts immediately as a rookie with the Packers, then has an injury. I think he only played 6 games. But since that rookie season, he's missed 1 game. He has started every game for the Packers at center. I know there was some discourse about, hey, if they're signing him, he's been a starting center for the Packers. Maybe they move around the offensive line. I don't think that happens like for week 1. I don't think Myers is your week 1 starting center. I don't think the plan is to move anybody. Like, I don't think they're trying to move Tippmann to guard. I don't think they're moving Vera Tucker to tackle. But I will say, I think it gives you that flexibility if you need to. And I think having that extra flexibility is really valuable. I don't love Vera Tucker at tackle. I would love to keep him at guard. But I do see.
Do you like him more than Okorafor at tackle?
Yes. Honestly, if they didn't add a right tackle, I would rather them start Myers and move Tippmann to guard and move Vera Tucker to right tackle. But I don't like that because I don't want Vera Tucker playing tackle because I think he has genuine Pro Bowl upside at guard. I don't think he does at tackle. But
But if it's about getting your best 5 linemen, then Myers, you can put Myers at guard too and keep Tippmann at center.
Right now, well, the thing with that is though,
Josh Myers right now is the 5th or 6th best lineman on the team.
He's the 5th. I think he's definitively, in my opinion, better than Okorafor right now, and I think he's definitely better than Xavier Newman or Carter Warren or Max Mitchell, whoever else they have in a contract. But I will say, while I don't love Vera Tucker at tackle, I can get behind Tippmann at guard. I don't know how that would work. If you're moving Tippmann to guard, you're
he was so good last year at center anyway.
I was really good at center, but 2 things on that. One, the snapping issues are still a thing. There's still a thing with him. They weren't as prevalent throughout the season as we thought they might have been after the issues in the summer, but they are still an issue from time to time. And he's like, what, 6'5", 6'6", Tippmann?
6'6", big center.
The one issue with Tippmann that I see a lot is he has trouble with leverage, which is a thing. That's a very common thing for centers that are that tall. It is very difficult for a 6'6" center to have a successful NFL career. It's possible. Mitch Morse with the Bills did it. There have been examples. Tippmann is the exception, not the rule. But I think he'd be even better at guard. And we've seen him play guard before. Now, again, I don't think they do that, because if they do that, they have to move Vera Tucker to tackle. And I don't love Vera Tucker at tackle, but I think it's at least a possibility. It's an option. And bringing in Josh Myers at the very least is excellent offensive line depth. This is a guy who has started every game in his NFL career. Offensive line depth does not grow on trees. It is not easy to have good quality offensive line depth in the NFL. I do think Wes Schweitzer was quality offensive line depth. The problem is the guy could never stay healthy. He was always hurt. Myers is very durable. He's only missed 1 game over the last 3 years, and he's played at in my opinion, a starting caliber level. Not a good.
I'm surprised he didn't get more starting interest.
I agree, and I remember we talked to Freddie Boston, who runs the Packers site, Lombardi Avenue for Fansite, and he was surprised as well. He while Josh Myers is not a particularly good starting center, I think he's a starting caliber center. The Jets just signed him to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal, which that's the only reason I'm like, well, clearly they don't intend to start him if they're paying him that kind of money, which is backup money. But at the very least, excellent offensive line depth and gives you extra versatility, which is always needed along the offensive line.
Let's get to some comments from members here. Chew, they provided good depth in the trenches. The Stevens signing seems peculiar. That's the only signing I really dislike and it's not even the player, it's just more the money they gave him.
The details came out more today. I haven't looked at it exactly, but from what I read, it is basically a 2-year deal. I'm going to see if I can pull up the exact contract here. It's basically a 2-year deal with what is essentially a team option. Let's see. So they have, he has virtually no guaranteed money after 2026. So that they can very easily get out of that contract, but only $6 million in dead cap after 2026. So if it doesn't work out, it's basically a 2-year deal. Not the worst thing, but yeah, I'm with you, Chew. Definitely not my favorite signing. I think there were much better ways they could have spent that money.
And also, I wonder what AG thinks of Zaire. Is he still on the Zaire Barnes?
He's still around.
He's still hanging around. Good special teamer.
I don't know what Aaron Glenn thinks of Zaire Barnes, but they will need a third linebacker. They don't have one at the moment. I don't know what the plan is for that position. Last year, because Mosley got hurt, and now Mosley's released. We didn't get to talk about that last week.
The mock draft that had him taking Jalen Walker.
The Jets?
Yeah.
What is the top 10 hype with Jalen Walker? I don't get it.
I get it.
You get it? You get him as a top 10 pick? What is it? Where are you playing him first?
He's kind of that like Micah Parsons-y, Reddick-y, moves around, good Hassan Reddick kind of guy.
But also, wasn't that the criticism with Hassan Reddick early in his career, is that he didn't have a defined position? And it wasn't until they fully moved him to like actual edge rusher that he broke out. Like, he was not great as an off-ball linebacker.
Or another good example recently, a guy like a Zach Bond. Because really the top 2 linebackers this year are Walker and Jihad Campbell, and they're very similar styles.
Bond didn't really play edge rusher last year for the Eagles. He was basically just an off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, but they used him on the edge.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. With a player like that, it's always such a hard trend. Like, it's hard.
And he's a crazy athlete, so
he is. No, it's hard for me to project a guy like that to the NFL level.
But after they take a backup linebacker,
that's the thing. I'm like, because he's probably not playing edge, because you have Jermaine Johnson and
he's small for edge anyway. He's like 240.
Right. And so you're basically replicating what Will McDonald offers you as a pass rusher. Maybe, I don't know. He's not going to be as good of a pass rusher probably immediately as McDonald. And he doesn't offer a ton of run defense, at least at edge. And so now you're drafting him to be your third linebacker at 7? Like, that's...
Yeah, I remember I think it might have been Bucky Brooks. I don't want to slander him if it's not, but I think that's who it was.
Like, I would have... That would be... I don't want to say a disastrous pick, but I would have so many questions about that pick.
Brian Glick, they need 90 going into camp. Many of these signings are just tryout level contracts. Yeah, that's like the Tufele and Stone Smart to a degree.
Others that we didn't even discuss and we're not going to talk about. They signed a punter, Austin McNamara, who didn't even
Well,
play.
I've interviewed Austin McNamara.
You did interview Austin McNamara last year before the draft for Stacking the Box. Go check out that interview if you want some insight on the Jets' newest punter. He's Thomas Morstead. It'll be a position battle with Thomas Morstead in the summer. They also signed Chris Boyd, who is basically a special teamer. I remember in Texas, he was actually a pretty good corner.
And unlike Zach, the worst interview I've done, I remember, not to slander him, was Zach Frazier for the Steelers because he did it right after he got a dental procedure in his car.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Like, I remember asking it was just a question like, who's the toughest guy you played against or something like that, and he goes, Byron Murphy with stuff in his. Oh, jeez. I cut it short after like 7 minutes. I'm like, look, I'm not getting this guy.
Poor guy.
I think it was a scheduling mix-up, and they still did the interview. I'm like, just tell me to move it, man. I could have.
Yeah. Brian says Armand Membu at 7, please. I'd love it, man. I was. I don't want to. I wasn't the first to be on the Armand Membu train. There were people before me, but I was banging that drum before the combine. Before it was cool to mock him to the Jets at 7, and now here he is. And now I think a lot of people want him at 7. He's still probably one of my favorite targets at 7. I think. You do that, you solidify the offensive line as the strength of your team. And if you look at those Detroit Lions teams, if they're trying to mimic what they did, that's what they did. The Detroit Lions, that strength of that entire roster was built around that offensive line.
They also have 2,000-yard receivers and a 5,000-yard.
Absolutely, but it starts with the offensive line. You're not. The Jets aren't going to be the Lions in one offseason. They're not going to be able to replicate what the Lions did this year, just like the Lions weren't able to do that in 1 year. But you start by establishing a foundation of that offensive line, which they already have, and then just solidifying it as a strength with Armand Membu. Because I don't know if it's a crazy take to say, but Fashanu, Simpson, Tittman, Vera Tucker, Membu, that's top 10 offensive line material right there. Like if Membu hits and the other guys play as well as they did last year and they're healthy, that's a top 10 offensive line in my opinion. Especially because addition by subtraction, you no longer have Keith Carter coaching the unit.
I just think it'll be tough to. There's more good skill position players than I think people are giving this draft credit for. And when there's Warren and McMillan, or even if you want to trade down and get a Colston Loveland, like there's a lot of.
And maybe that's why you can go day 2 with those, because realistically, you're not finding a day 1 starting offensive lineman on day 2. Like you're just not. You're not going to find a guy who's probably going to start a right tackle for you in the 2nd or 3rd round. Maybe if you get lucky and you draft someone who exceeds their draft expectation, draft evaluation.
I can see like a Cameron Williams, who was a right tackle at Texas.
But you're not expecting that guy to start week 1 if you're drafting him, because you're not drafting Cameron Williams in week 1 or on day 1. Like that's a 2nd round pick at best. I don't even know if he goes 42. He might go later.
Oh, he would. Yeah,
You think 42? Maybe.
I haven't seen anything that has him sliding past like the top 50.
Is he like in the same tier as like the Connerleys? You think?
Connerly's a little above. He's in that more like. There's a little bit of a gap between there's like some mid-2nd round guys, and then there's like really no late 2nd round guys this year. But he's like Ariante Urzuri, like he's in that sort of level. Sharon McLean really quick woke up feeling like Lazard dropped shit all day at work. That's mean.
Hey, that is your wide receiver too, Sharon. Show some respect.
And then we got 2 comments. Brian Glick, another high pick in the O-line, will help Fields in the run game, and
100%.
Chew.
100%.
I'm leery of this is a point counterpoint here. So Brian Glick with point. Sure. It'll help Fields in the run game. Yes, it will, because Membu is a very good run blocker.
Yes.
Chew, I'm leery of Membu. I'm always skeptical about draft picks that skyrocket due to what they do with the combine in shorts and t-shirts.
See, here's the thing on that. I don't think he skyrocketed due to the combine. I don't think
it helped, but
I don't think
that put him over the top.
I don't think he skyrocketed at all. I think the media finally just caught up to how the NFL perceives Armand Membu. I think Armand Membu has been a top 10 prospect for NFL teams for most of the draft process. And now because of the combine, the media is like, oh, wait, this guy's actually really good. Like he's actually a top 10 caliber player. I think that's more so what happened as opposed to NFL teams saw him run in shorts and t-shirt and were like, oh, he's actually really good. Like, no, I don't think that's what happened here. And I don't think that's usually, I think usually when guys skyrocket at the combine, especially nowadays, this used to happen a lot more where somebody would run a super fast 40 and it's like, oh, well, John Ross, now he has to be a top.
Especially back then when it was harder to see these guys and then you see a guy and then it's like, who the hell is that? Now everything's all.
I think the combine.
You've seen Armand Membu before that.
the combine, especially the testing drills, mean a lot less now. Honestly, what means just as much as the testing drills is the medical evaluations and the conversations that these players have with teams and the impressions that they leave. And so I think if Membu's stock did rise, it was more because of that. It was more because, hey, his not only did his medicals check out, but the measurements really checked out.
It was rising, and then he ran a 4.91, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
now he's like a lock top.
And the arm length checked out, and his competition at the position, Will Campbell, the arm length did not check out. And the word coming out of the combine is that most teams do not see Campbell as a tackle. So because of that, there's really only one player that at the top of this class that the majority of teams seem to see as a tackle or seem to view as a tackle, and that's Armand Membu. So I think that's why you've seen him skyrocket in mock drafts a lot more, but I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, teams are just figuring out he's good. I don't think he's changed as a prospect. I think it's more these circumstances around him have contributed to him rising in mock drafts. Connor saying, Mike and Justin, what's up, Connor? How you doing, buddy?
I'd still take Campbell, though. Like, if I had to pick, if they're both there at 7, I'd take Campbell just because.
And you think he can play tackle? You think he can play right tackle?
Well, I mean, maybe not for the Jet because they need Campbell's on the left side. But if I just was starting a roster from 0, then yeah, I'd take Campbell over.
I think Campbell's going to be a really good guard. I think he's going to be a really good guard in the NFL. I don't know. Maybe I'm dumb. Most teams don't see him as a tackle. Maybe they'll stick him. Maybe it'll be like a Tristan Wirfs situation where they stick him at
Wirfs. Yeah, that's what you're hoping for.
Or maybe it's like a Zach Martin where it's like, he's not going to be a tackle, but hey.
Well, Martin was a guard in college anyway, right?
What was that?
I think he was a guard in college anyway. Zach
Martin. Why do I think he played tackle? Did he not play tackle?
I think they used him as a little bit of both, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure.
I know his brother Nick was there as a center.
Yes, he was. Connor Long with $10. Let's go, Mike. Great scouting report on my guy, Jaden Higgins. Which, yes, Jaden Higgins, go check that out. We wrote him up on the Jet Press.
Let's go
talk about this, too, because he says Tet is his pick.
Real quick, Zach Martin played left tackle in college.
Oh, he did? Okay. Then he moved to right guard. And then he
moved to right guard in the NFL.
Yeah. Thank you, Connor Long. But, Justin's not as high on Tet as perhaps I am.
I like Tet McMillan. I think he is a good wide receiver prospect who is going to be a good NFL player. I see him as a really good wide receiver too. I see him as somebody who maybe can get 1,000 yards in the right offense. And, I like him more as a fit for the Jets than other teams. So I wouldn't hate it at 7 because I think he complements Garrett Wilson very well. I just think there will be guys available at 7 that I have ranked higher and that I'd rather pick, whether that's an Armand Membu, whether that's a Mason Graham, whether that's even, honestly, I think I would rather Tyler Warren than Ted McMillan. It's close.
I would too, but honestly, if I had my choice of picks, it might be Warren 1, McMillan 2. Like that's how how dire the need for skill position guys are right now.
Even like assuming Graham, like what about Mason Graham? Is he in that conversation, or are you assuming he's gone?
I assume he's gone.
Yeah. Graham's like
New England could take him. Jacksonville could take him. Maybe the Raiders just make a super defensive line with him and Christian Wilkins.
Graham is an interesting one because while I love him as a player, he's like the opposite of Tet for me, where I think the Jets fit is actually a little weird because he's definitely a natural 3 tech. He's smaller.
He's Quinnen, but they have Quinnen.
He's Quinnen, but they already have Quinnen. So if you draft Mason Graham, you're basically going to play Quinnen a lot more at 1 tech and nose tackle, which is kind of what happened last year.
Or you put Graham there, which I don't know if that would be because he's a good run stuffer, but
I don't think you can't. That would either way. You're not going to be maximizing one of those 2 players, which makes it a weird fit. I don't hate it because I think he's a really good player. But I'd still love it. Like if the Jets took him at 7, I wouldn't be upset, and I'd be like, they'll find a way to get these guys in the field and use them well. And look, if the difference is, hey, we're playing Quinnen at 1 tech a little bit more instead of Derek Nottie. Oh boy. Don't threaten me with a good time. Like, that's fine. Like, Quinn is still going to be a much better 1 tech than Derek Nottie. I just don't think you're maximizing him particularly well.
All right, let's do this then, Jeff. All right, so my top, if I could pick anybody right now at 7, my top 3 would probably be Warren, McMillan, Graham.
Number 1.
The need is so dire at tight end. And Fields has liked throwing to tight ends in his career. Komet, Freiermuth, Freiermuth would have had 65 catches if he kept playing the whole season with Fields, if he kept that pace up. So you can't go Jeremy Ruckert tight end 1 and expect Fields to do as much as you like Jeremy Ruckert.
Look, I'm not going to draft for need at 7. Like that's my entire philosophy here is I'm going BPA. Whoever is the best player available on my board, as long as they fit what the Jets are looking for, I'm going to take that player. Warren, I think he's a great player, and I would not be upset if they took him at 7. And the need for tight end is a lot bigger than the need for right tackle or even D tackle at this stage. I think I'd go. It's so close between Membu and Graham for me. I think Membu's a much better fit, but I think Graham's a better prospect. So because I just said what I just said, and I don't want to be because I just said that, and I don't want to be a hypocrite, I'll take Graham.
I want to contradict myself in the span of a minute.
Immediately contradict myself. So I would take Mason Graham, but I wouldn't be upset if they took Membu. Yeah, honestly, if Graham's there at 7 and you pass, like I can't justify that. Mason Graham, if he's there at 7, I'm taking. That goes for like if Travis Hunter is somehow there at 7, you're taking.
Oh my God, yeah.
If Abdul Carter
5 trade up, I don't care.
If Abdul Carter is somehow there at 7, you're taking. Like those 3 guys, if they're there at 7, you're taking them. Then I would say Membu. Then I'd say Warren, then Ted. I think is how I would do those 4 players. But Warren and Ted are in a very similar tier to me. I think they're similar caliber prospects, but I think that McMillan is they're both better fits. Warren's just a bigger need. They're both big needs, but I think Warren's a bigger need. But I like, I think I like Warren better as a prospect, but McMillan fits the Jets more than he does other teams. Like I think he just complements Garrett Wilson very well. So I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't be upset. I know we just sort of roundabout way to answer this question, but I'd be fine with Ted. I'd be happy with Ted. Not my top pick, but I think he's going to be a very good player.
Chu says, this is the first draft I could see drafting a tight end early. I think Warren is a great fit in what appears to be a run-heavy possession offense. Sharon McLean says, Warren Warriors unite. Yeah. I'll disagree with that a little bit, Chu, in that I think he's an okay blocker, but I remember when I was starting my reports, and one of the weaknesses was, Tyler Warren's not a great, because for a while, him and Colston Loveland were very even. And the selling point was, Loveland is like the traditional inline blocker guy, and Tyler Warren's more of the better. Then Warren, I think, surpassed him because he was just doing a ton of crazy stuff at Penn State this year. But I think if you take him, you're going to probably live with, it's not bad. It's like how people, or how am I going to say this? People only care about tight end blocking when they're doing like legacy arguments, like, Gronk or Travis Kelce. Well, Travis Kelce can't block. Like that's the only time I hear is when lunkheads from New England talk about Gronk was a better blocker than Kelce.
Remember the Kittle versus Kelce debates? That was always.
Yeah. Which by the way, Kelce can block. He's okay at it. He's not amazing. He's not
Tyler Conklin.
He's not Tyler. No, like that's what I think. Warren will be an okay blocker with 1,000-yard receiving potential in the right offense.
Yes, I agree.
I think that's where we're at. Like, I don't think he's a better prospect than Bowers because Bowers was all-time unprecedented receiving ability for a tight end. But I think when you get Warren, I think no matter who they add at receiver or what else, if you draft Warren, immediately he's the number 2 passing target behind Garrett. That's the appeal of him. And now, again, he could get better at blocking. I think having Steve Hyden being a former blocking tight end and the offensive line, I think that would really help him if he went there. But you're drafting Tyler Warren because of his receiving ability. If you want the better blocker, then maybe you trade down to like 13, 14, get Colston Loveland, and then we go from there.
I think the appeal is projection with Tyler Warren because he's 6'6", 255 or whatever he is. He's huge. Like Tyler Warren's a big boy. Like if you teach
how big is this man, Justin?
He's a big man.
Let's talk about his size.
He's a large man, a large dude, sizable human.
A
humongous guy. He's big. He's big. He's 6'6", 250 pounds.
Take him to dinner first, man.
It's getting to the late hours of the podcast.
Chu has a good quote though, where it says, "I'm biased due to being a big fan of John Riggins, those old power guys.
Ooh.
Not a Warren Warrior or a dart bag."
Dart? No. Is that what they call Jackson dart fans? That's a terrible
name. I hope not. No.
There's so many other ways you could have gone with a dart bag.
Dart boards?
A dart board or a dart. Not a dart bag. Hey, Chu, all right, you know what?
Has answered all doubts by giving out 5 different memberships. So
thank you so much, Chu. You're the
man. Receiving target, says Brian Glick. He is, but he would be number 3 behind Warren.
Here's the thing. He is a receiving threat. He also, I believe, led the team besides Allen Lazard in drops last year and had a lot of ball security issues, whether it was drops or fumbles. So I hesitate to trust Breece Hall as a primary receiving target in the offense because of last year. Hopefully it was just an anomaly, but he was not a very reliable receiver by any means last season. But yeah.
Let's get into some weekly draft spotlights because free agency has kind of pushed this segment to the side for too long.
Dart blowers, Brian says.
Dart blower. Oh no. I'm getting
no.
Dark Souls 1, Blighttown flashbacks.
Take him out to dinner first, Brian.
No one will get that reference that I just made, but
what'd you say?
The Dark Souls 1, those toxic dart blowers in Blighttown.
I mean, Dark Spawn, I don't play Dark Souls, but a lot of people play Dark Souls.
Okay, yeah, but if you've played it, you know, basically they give you this thing that kills you immediately and you can't hear them, so you'll just be standing around and then all of a sudden you'll get shot from somewhere that you don't even see on the map. Okay, so
crossover Jet Press podcast.
You have touched the sore nerve with that pithy comment. But let's get into weekly draft spotlight. And oddly enough, the guy that I'm going to be focusing on is a defensive tackle. Another Ohio State guy. Maybe next time I'll try not have an Ohio State guy, but they may have 10, 12 guys get picked this year. I mean, they were just loaded. If they don't get Mason Graham in the first round, and if they don't want to wait until the third round to find a guy who would probably play as much as the number 3 defensive tackle on this team would, they may need to pick a guy in the second round. And for that, I think they're going to get a guy who could really, for his size, is one of the better pound-for-pound athletes at the position, and that's Tyleik Williams. Tyleik Williams is never going to be, even though he has decent sack numbers for kind of like a space-eating tackle, he'll get like 2 sacks a year kind of thing. Better than you want. He's never going to be an amazing pass rusher. His pressure rates are very low. He's 330 pounds, not the quickest athlete, but everything you want in like a 2-down run stuffer. He's kind of a little more athletic Al Woods because he is a good athlete despite his lack of pass rush. He does move very well for his size. Good run stuffer. The thing I like too is he's played a lot of his games against future NFL interior linemen, and I thought he won a lot of those matchups, especially even in games where they lost Oregon, Michigan. They weren't because of him. He was playing really well in the Oregon, Michigan games, Penn State particularly. He had a very good game against Penn State. The thing I like about Tyleik Williams is he's very defined in a way where, like, you know what you're getting. For a second-round pick, he's an extremely known quantity, and he's a role player. He's good. Like, you know, nobody gets like, you know, if you're casting a movie, like, you don't get the guy who's like 5'4" or 130 pounds to go and play Darkseid against the Justice League. It doesn't fit. You know what he's going to be coming in. And I think that having that and not just being a developmental ball of clay, because right now it seems like the Jets have a lot of raw balls of clay that this coaching staff's got to mold and can this work out. I want to eliminate some of that in the draft. Let's just get something stable, a guy who you know is going to come in and immediately plug up holes in the running game. If not, he just completely crashes out, which is possible because he was really bad last year. Then you get a replacement in a guy like Tyleik Williams.
You know who NFL.com's pro comparison
was it? Al Woods?
Tyleik Williams? No, it is somebody who Aaron Glenn knows very well. One of the most underrated defensive linemen in the league, probably. It is Aleem McNeil. Which, look, if Aaron Glenn sees anything, you know, like Aleem McNeil and Tyleik Williams, I would not be surprised if Tyleik Williams was a day 2 pick for the Jets. Big dude, like you said, he's about goes 325, almost 330. And he's a good athlete for his size. Like, he's not a wow athlete. He's not going to wow you with his athleticism, but he can move. Like, he's not a bad athlete by any means. Good player, fills that one-tech archetype. If your starting D-line next year is Jermaine Johnson, Quinnen Williams, Tyleik Williams, and Will McDonald, that's really good. Like, that's a really good defensive line. I don't care if the depth is Byron Coward or Jay Tufele or whatever.
That's what they are. Those guys are depth pieces.
Right. You probably need a little bit more depth, and probably at edge you need some more depth, and maybe Will McDonald shouldn't be playing every running down. But just the duo of Quinnen Williams and Tyleik Williams in the middle, that's taking your run defense to new levels. Because Quinnen's a good run defense.
Williams defense. We're getting closer. We'd be almost over a quarter of the way there.
It's true. Quinnen, Quincy, Tyleik, they can add some more pieces. Maybe they'll bring in Marcus.
Yeah, we're almost there. Nope, that'd be a fun thing in the offseason. The all Williams team, the all Johnson team, the all Smith team.
That's a really good idea. We should totally do that. Oh, we should totally do all-time Jets team, but with only.
We're just NFL team.
I don't know if there'd be NFL. We could do all NFL.
That would be pretty cool.
But anyway, those are off-season ideas. But yeah, I like Tyleik Williams a lot. with my weekly draft spotlight, actually very topical, considering we were just talking about the state of the tight end room. We were just talking about Stone Smart. We were talking about maybe Tyler Warren at 7 and what you might be looking for. This Jets offense, if they're going to run a similar offense to what Detroit ran under Ben Johnson, they need blocking tight ends. They need tight ends who could block. Right now, they don't have a single tight end on the roster who I trust to fill that role. Jeremy Ruckert was, in theory, supposed to be that guy. He has not been a good blocker at the NFL level. Maybe I would hope he would be better under new coaching staff when Keith Carter is not I believe he was the run game coordinator, Keith Carter, and the running game was a disaster with assignments and blown assignments.
It takes really they had the Breece Hall, not explosive, but he did it.
Right. So I would hope it'd be better under a different coaching staff. But outside of that, they have Stone Smart and they have Zach Kuntz and they have, I think, Neil Johnson is technically on the roster. And maybe they bring back like a Tyler Conklin. I don't know. Either way, they need a blocker in that room. And so if I'm looking at this draft and I'm saying, all right, who's a guy that the Jets could target on day 3, who's probably never going to be a tight end one, who's never going to be someone who's playing 70, 80% of snaps. He's not going to be a 900-yard receiver, but who can fill that role. I'm looking at Jackson Hawes, Georgia Tech. 6'4.5", 253 pounds. He is the blocking tight end in this class. Only 1 year at Georgia Tech. He was at Yale before that, was an Ivy League standout who made the transition and played very well at Georgia Tech. Again, now this is a guy who does not have a significantly high ceiling, and he does not have a lot of production on tape as a pass catcher. Only caught, I believe, 16 passes last year. Was not utilized a ton in their
catch a lot
game.
at Yale. He had played 3 years at Yale. His catches that year, right. 13, 13, and 9.
Right. He is basically a 6th offensive lineman. That's how Georgia Tech used him. And honestly, that's what this Jets team needs. And if you can get a guy like that in the 5th round, I am all for it, because that is somebody who can fill a role for you. He's going to be an NFL caliber blocking tight end. Last year at a 74.7 run block grade, which is the 5th best amongst all tight ends in this class, which honestly, that's a really high grade. There's a couple of guys who were just a little bit better than him. He lined up in line 65% of the time. So the majority of the time, he is an inline tight end. He is blocking. That is his role. I'm happy with a guy like that. And honestly, I think there's still room to grow as a blocker too. Like, I think he can be even better. He has the size for that. He has the nasty demeanor, if you will. Very much a throwback old school tight end. And I think the Jets need that on this roster, especially if they're going to run a similar offense to like the Lions did, where you need blocking tight ends. You need multiple tight ends who can do that, because they ran a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 13 personnel. If the Jets want to do that, if that's the plan for this offense, Hawes makes a ton of sense to me.
Here are the problems I have with Hawes.
You always do. I know you have to play devil's advocate.
Well, because he is a good day 3 blocker. I think he tested very well at the combine, which
yeah, he's a good athlete.
He caught the amount of touchdowns he had last year was UGOTs, so nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 2 years, he had 1. So I'm fine with a blocking tight end, but when you have that little receiving upside, that's the question I have. Like, to use a pick on a guy who pretty much, if you look at his college career, I don't think he's going to be a factor ever in the NFL as a good receiver, unless he just goes to a crazy offense. That's probably the concern. Not. And I don't think he's particularly huge for just a straight up blocking tight end. I do wonder how well that's going to translate against professional athletes.
He's not small. He's 6'4", 253. That's not small at all. I know it's not
sick. I mean, you're 6th offensive lineman.
What was that? Who was that Georgia tight end who was like the worst athlete ever?
Darnell Washington.
Blocker? You know what I'm talking about? Oh, that might be what I'm thinking of. But there was a different guy who didn't make it to the NFL, who like barely made it. He was like a 6th-round pick a few years ago. I think he was Georgia. So I forget. But he ran like a 5-second 40-yard dash.
Was
or something.
It a guy for the Bucks? I remember. You got to give me more to go on.
I'll look it up. I know. I'll look it up. Hold on. But I think I also with Jackson Hawes, I think there is more room to grow there as well as a receiving option. I mean, like you said, he was at least a little bit more productive last year at Georgia Tech than he was during his time at Yale. Look, limited route running ability. There's not really a lot of tape there.
Steve Hyden, the Jets coach, had a very similar career. Jalen Weidermeyer, is that it? No, because he was supposed to be a good receiving tight end, and then he stunk at the combine.
I might also. I don't think he might not have gone to Georgia. He was some Southeast school.
I remember Dawson Knox didn't have a touchdown in college either, and he ended up being okay.
No, it wasn't him. Maybe it was Florida or something. It was one of the Southeast schools. And now I'm gonna I hate this so much.
I will say Sharon McLean has a very good idea, a very good Jets plan. So you trade back with the Cowboys to 12, get Warren at 12.
Yep.
I hope he's there at 12. I don't think he will be, but I hope he is. Tyreek Williams at 42, because that's the pick you'd get from Dallas in this hypothetical trade down. Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame, at 44. And Ozzie Trapillo, who's an offensive tackle from Boston College, at 73. That's an A draft. That is an A draft if that happens.
I don't
trade back and get Tyler Warren. That is an A draft. That's a good idea, Sharon.
And I think that's feasible because I don't think there's another
if Warren would last that long.
Right, and I think it's realistic. I don't think there's like
has 9. I feel like they might get him too.
7 is his absolute ceiling. For the Jets.
He's going between 7 and 14 because the Colts are 14. They need a tight end. So it's somewhere there. And New Orleans is 9. They need one too. So,
and I love Watts as a second round pick too. That's
better than most of the mock drafts I've seen for the Jets.
I feel like him and Malachi Starks were so hyped up as prospects, and everyone's like, these two are clearly going to be two of the best safeties in college football. That like they had really good years. Watts was really good this year. It's prospect fatigue. Like Watts was really good this year, and I feel like he's really getting like if he went in the first round, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I wouldn't be like you're an idiot if you took. If the back end of the first round, because there's talk about Nick Emanwari going first round.
Oh, Emanwari
is a better prospect.
He's a lock. Emanwari.
For the first, and do you like Emanwari?
Emanwari I might have as like a top 15 player. I mean, I liked him before that. He's my Membu. Where like even before the testing, I liked him, and then he did that and that level. I'm like, oh my god, he would have a 10 RAS, I believe, as a linebacker and a safety, which is crazy.
Yes, he's an unbelievable athlete, like a ridiculous,
insane athlete.
I think Watts is a better football player.
The problem is he struggles with tackling, though. That's his thing. Like he can't.
Yeah, but he's got really good ball skills. He's what you want.
And he's a converted wide receiver. He was recruited as a receiver, so he's still getting better.
Yeah.
But I like Sharon's idea. Send your mock drafts in the comments because we are going to go sign off here. Thank you guys for tuning into the Jet Press. This is a pretty jam-packed show. Got a lot of good stuff out here. You know where to find us on all the podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. Justin, any final notes?
I'm still trying to find that player.
You never got a Georgia tight end. Yeah, there's never any of those.
Oh God, I'm trying to.
What are you looking for? Like every drafted tight end ever?
I'm googling a bunch of stuff and I can't find.
What year was it?
He was. It was a few years ago. It was like 2021, 2020, 2019, somewhere around there.
His team at all?
Yeah. I think it was Georgia. Like my mind says Georgia. Oh. No, I don't think he played I don't know if he ever played more than a few snaps in the NFL. He was a tight end whose stock completely plummeted at the combine because he ran like a 4.5 or like a 5-second 40-yard dash.
Yeah, this is gonna again. You're not.
That'd be crazy right now.
We'll find it at some point. I'm sure it's gonna come to you at like 3 a.m. and you're gonna text me. I remember it.
Next week on this show, be here because I'm gonna find out who it was and I will say it at the top of the show. Okay, so. Be waiting a week for that. Other people could just Google it. I'm going to Google it right after this, and I'll probably find it. But anyway, until next time, thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @BuyMikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Fried. Follow JetPress and JetPress. Download the JetPress podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also become a member today. I think we're up to like 30 or so members, Mike. We are rolling. We've had a lot of love over the last few weeks and the last couple of months, and it is so much appreciated. I know Connor Long donated $10 earlier. Mother Effing Chew donated some memberships. We really appreciate you guys so much. And it is a busy time for us with draft season coming up and free agency just passed. We appreciate everybody who tunes in, who supports the show in any way. It means the world to us. And I cannot say enough how much it means to us. But yeah, we stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be back next Wednesday, 3 p.m. right here on the Jet Press YouTube channel. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Fried. That's Mike Luciano. Tune in next week when I hopefully find out who that tight end was. And I will relay the
teaser. Get you excited for the next week. That's show business for you.
Yeah.